The rains had fallen heavy that year, soaking the earth of Njabalo until it oozed mud with every step. The villagers said it was a blessing from the gods, a promise of good harvests and quiet nights. But Sefiu had long stopped believing in the things the village claimed to understand. She was 17, with sharp bones, sharper eyes, and the kind of gaze that made elders shift uncomfortably. Her mother used to cup her face gently and say, "Child, not everything that's seen should be known." But Sefiu couldn't help it. Seeing was in her blood. She noticed the small things, the flicker of guilt behind a smile, the quick hush of a name, the red smudge wiped too quickly from a stone behind the shrine. While others looked away, she kept watching. Njabalo was wrapped in secrets like vines around an old tree. It sat nestled between thick forests that whispered too loudly at night, and hills where no one dared walk after dusk. The elders said it was a sacred place, protected and blessed. But Sefiu knew better. She had seen the trade carts roll in long after the village had gone quiet, the merchants' faces tense and silent, their goods carried not to the market but to the back of the shrine. She had seen old Mama Binta, the one who claimed to be blind, pause to glance both ways before hiding a bloodied cloth beneath the roots of the judgment tree. And once, just once, she had seen a child go into the shrine and never come back. Sefiu never spoke of what she saw. Not to her mother, not to her sister, not even to herself when she lay awake at night. But her silence didn't make her invisible. The way she stared, like she could unravel someone's lies just by blinking, made people wary. Some said she had spirit eyes. Others called her cursed. One elder warned, "That girl looks too long. The earth doesn't like eyes that question." It was on the night of the red moon that everything shifted. The air had been thick, sticky with heat and the scent of burning herbs. Sefiu had climbed onto the roof of her hut, as she often did, where the wind whispered clearer truths. That's when she saw them, the masked ones, emerging silently from the shrine. 7 figures in dark red robes, faces hidden beneath wooden masks carved like twisted animals. They carried something between them, wrapped in palm leaves and bound tightly with vine. It twitched. Once. Then stopped. They circled the village's central stone, the one no one was allowed to touch, and began to chant in a language Sefiu had never heard. Her breath caught in her throat, but she didn't move. She watched until the chanting stopped, until the leaves no longer moved, until the 7 figures returned to the shrine with blood dripping behind them. She thought she had seen something ancient. Something forbidden. And she was right. The next morning, before the sun had finished rising, they came for her. 5 men, faces covered in ash, dragged her from her mat. Her mother screamed. Her sister clung to her leg. But no one stopped them. They accused her of something vague, watching what must not be watched. She tried to speak, but a hand slapped her silent. They tied her wrists. The villagers gathered. No one met her eyes. As they pulled her down the path toward the judgment circle, Sefiu didn't cry. She looked. At every face. Every silence. Every lie. And still, no one looked back. The path to the judgment circle was lined with silence. No one spoke as Sefiu was dragged forward, not the men gripping her arms, not the villagers who peeked out from behind shutters, not even the birds that usually sang from the forest's edge. The morning light was cruel and unforgiving, casting long shadows that wrapped around her feet like chains. Her wrists burned from the ropes, her knees scraped from being forced to walk too fast. And still, she looked. But not for long. The judgment circle sat in the heart of Njabalo, a perfect ring of red earth surrounded by 12 stones, each one carved with the names of the ancestors. At its center stood the stone of confession, worn smooth from centuries of knees pressed to its surface. Behind it loomed the 7 elders, wrapped in thick ceremonial cloaks of bark and bone, faces painted with white ash that made them look like spirits of the dead. Sefiu's feet were shoved beneath the sun's eye, right before them. Elder Duma was the first to speak. His voice cut through the air like a knife. "You looked where you were told not to look." Sefiu's lips were cracked, her mouth dry. She didn't answer. You spied on the gods, Elder Nkasha added, stepping forward. You watched the sacred rites, broke the ancient vow. The punishment is clear. From the crowd, someone whimpered. Sephu turned her head slightly and caught a glimpse of her sister, barely visible between two villagers. Her small hands trembled over her mouth. Their mother stood just behind her, unmoving, eyes cast to the ground. No one came forward. Not a single hand lifted in protest. Not even a whisper of mercy. Sephu felt the breath leave her chest, but still she didn't speak. They had already decided. No words could undo the fear that had gripped the village. The elder priestess emerged from the shadows then, slow and sure. She wore the red veil of judgment, trailing behind her like smoke. In her hands she carried a gourd etched with ancient runes, sealed with rope and wax. She uncorked it with reverence, and the air filled with the scent of old fire and burnt herbs. This is ash taken from the first sacrifice, she intoned, her voice both soft and terrifying. It carries the pain of the gods and the silence of the buried. With this, we return the sinner to darkness. Two men held Sephu down. Her face was tilted up to the sky, her eyes wide, staring, not with pleading, but with quiet defiance. The priestess dipped her fingers into the gourd and smeared the ash across Sephu's eyelids, pressing it hard, rubbing until it burned. Sephu bit her lip, refusing to cry out. The ash scorched like fire. Her skin blistered. Her vision clouded, then shattered into 1,000 black sparks. She gasped, but still didn't scream. By the time they dragged her away from the stone, she could no longer see the circle. The light was gone. The world had become a shapeless, endless dark. At the forest's edge, they dumped her like refuse. Her hands were untied, but her legs were too weak to stand. Before disappearing, one of the masked men muttered, "Let the darkness teach you silence." And then they were gone. The forest was colder than she remembered. It pulsed with sound, insects, whispers, the rustling of trees. Sephu lay on her side, her cheeks sticky with tears she hadn't meant to shed. Her thoughts spun in circles. Would she die here? Was this all her life would become, a warning, a forgotten name, a story parents told their daughters to keep them obedient? But the night had other plans. It began as a flicker, faint and soft, like candlelight behind her eyelids. Sephu blinked, though she no longer could see. The darkness around her didn't feel empty anymore. It had shape. Texture. Movement. Then she saw it. Not with her eyes, but inside her mind. A glow, outlines of trees, the shape of roots under the soil, the breath of something standing behind her. She turned. A figure stood there, not entirely human, not entirely spirit, glowing at the edges, as if stitched together by moonlight. Its head tilted slowly, as though curious. Sephu didn't run. She couldn't. But she also wasn't afraid. In the days that followed, she began to understand. The ash hadn't taken her sight, it had only changed it. She no longer saw color or detail or faces. But she saw truths. She saw the spirits that lingered in the trees, the shame that wrapped around the villagers' homes like smoke, the hunger of the earth beneath the shrine. She saw fear trailing behind people like long shadows. And sometimes, in the deepest dark of night, she saw something else. A shape without light. Watching. Waiting. It pulsed with old rage and broken promises. She didn't know its name. But it knew hers. Sephu. She whispered it aloud once, to herself, just to remember who she was. And in return, something whispered back. The forest had no paths, only memory. Branches curved like old arms, roots rose like warnings, and the air buzzed with a language older than words. Sephu wandered, blind but not lost. Her feet followed sounds, the hum of insects, the drip of dew, the shiver of a wind that did not touch her skin. Her world was no longer black, it shimmered with strange outlines and quiet signals. She saw without seeing, outlines, pulses, movements like breath in the soil. But her body was failing. The burns around her eyes throbbed, hot and swollen. Her lips were cracked, and her limbs trembled beneath her weight. That's when she heard it, a humming. It was a low, rhythmic tune, carried on the wind like a lullaby meant for something deeper than sleep. Sephu turned her head toward the sound. It was close. Too precise to be wind. The notes were old, tangled in memory. Then, from the quiet, came footsteps. Barefoot. Soft against the forest floor. She braced herself, one arm raised, though she knew it would be no use. But no pain came. No rope. No fire. Only the warmth of hands, gentle but strong, pressing against her skin, lifting her carefully from the moss. Child, a woman's voice murmured, rich and firm, they left you broken. But broken things speak to me. Sephu opened her mouth, but the words crumbled. The woman didn't ask for them. She only hummed again, cradling Sephu as though she weighed nothing, carrying her deeper into the forest until the trees opened into a hidden clearing, one that pulsed with old life. A hut stood there, low to the ground, made from twisted wood and covered in moss. No smoke rose from it, yet it felt warm. Inside, it smelled of salt and pepper root, of ash and oil. The woman bathed Sephu's wounds with water that hissed when it touched her skin. She smeared paste that stung and then soothed. She fed her by hand, broth that tasted like wood smoke and healing. For 3 days, the woman said little. Only the hums filled the silence, strange and familiar, like lullabies from a time before language. On the 4th day, Sephu finally spoke. Who are you? The woman did not stop grinding herbs. Some call me Mkali. Most call me nothing. Sephu's brows twitched. The name trembled on the edge of some half-forgotten tale. You were banished, she said slowly. Mkali didn't deny it. They call it exile. But really, they feared what I saw. Sephu turned her face toward the firelight, though she couldn't see it in the way she once could. Still, the shapes glowed faintly in her new sight. The walls of the hut curled like protection. The woman's silhouette shimmered red, not just her dress, but her entire body. Flame-colored, as if her soul had bled out through her skin. They feared you too, Mkali said, now staring at her. The ones who blinded you cannot hide now. You'll see what they fear most. Sephu flinched at the words, not because they frightened her, but because something inside her responded. Mkali taught her differently than any elder ever had. Lessons were not given, they were uncovered. Sephu was blind in the world others knew, but in the world beneath, she began to see more. Her new vision worked like light behind cloth, indirect, blurred, but truer than truth. In time, she could walk through the forest unaided. She learned to feel the pulse of people's lives, not in sound or touch, but in the way their spirits twisted around them. Some were wrapped in green vines of envy. Others had thorns of guilt curling around their necks. When they spoke falsehoods, the vines squirmed, tightening. But there was something worse. Black fog. It didn't come from within people, it hovered near them, slow and steady, like a cloud biding its time. It followed the ones whose hands were soaked in blood, even if their skin was clean. It loomed over 3 names Sephu dared to whisper, Duma. Nkasha. The priestess. The fog was death. But it was not coming for just anyone. It was selective. Hungry. It circled those tied to the ritual. Those who had watched a child bleed and said nothing. The fog was not just an omen. It was a promise. Sephu began to dream. In those dreams, she walked through the village veiled in black, and the people fell to their knees before her. Her voice echoed with 2 tones, her own, and another that came from the shadow watching behind her shoulder. Sometimes, she saw Mkali in the dreams, watching with pride. Sometimes, she saw the masked figures again, only now, she knew them all by name. In one dream, the judgment stone cracked down the middle, and from it spilled not blood, but ash. The same ash they used to blind her. Only now it covered the village. She awoke from that dream sweating and smiling. Mkali noticed. You are changing, she said, not with fear, but approval. I am not afraid anymore, Sephu whispered. Good, said Nkali, tying herbs into little pouches. Because fear is the only shield they have left. That night, as Sefu sat outside beneath the starlight she could no longer see, she reached out with her mind. She felt the shape of the village in the distance. She traced the lines of the roads, the outline of the shrine, the warm breath of the judgment circle. She no longer felt like a girl discarded. She felt like something being reborn. Sefu stepped onto the path to Njabalo just as the sun began to rise, its red light stretching like veins across the land. A thin veil covered her face, frayed at the edges, colored the dull brown of dust and silence. Her robes were ragged. Her eyes, unseen beneath cloth and shadow, faced forward, steady and calm. She carried no staff, no companion, no name. The forest did not try to stop her. The wind moved around her like it knew her scent. The trees made space where none had been before. Even the birds were silent. By the time she reached the village, the day had fully broken. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children chased chickens barefoot in the dust. Women called out to each other from the river path. It was all the same, and yet different. The village breathed as if nothing had changed, but something had shifted. She could feel it like a crack beneath the surface. No one noticed her at first. Just another beggar returning from the forest, perhaps a widow who had lost her name to grief. She sat beneath the shade of the old shade tree near the village square, her bowl placed before her, head bowed in humility. But she was watching, not with eyes, but with that deep, humming sight that lived beneath her skin. The village glowed faintly with guilt. It hung in the air like smoke, a faint shimmer of secrets. But around certain homes, the guilt thickened into something heavier. Wrath. Shame. Fear. She followed it with her senses, tracing threads like a weaver. She saw him, the first one. He was a merchant, once loud and brash, with thick bracelets and a belly that spoke of fat trade deals. His name was Aboro, and he had been one of the first to shout blind her, in the judgment circle. Sefu remembered the spit that flew from his mouth as he accused her of defying the ancestors. He passed by her shade without recognizing the girl beneath the veil. His spirit, though, pulsed hot and erratic. The black fog trailed him like a second skin. He paused, just a few steps beyond her, wiping sweat from his brow. Then he staggered. Sefu didn't move. Aboro collapsed in the center of the path, mouth open, eyes bulging. A few villagers screamed. Some ran to him, others stood frozen. He twitched once. Then nothing. The whispers began before sunset. The gods are angry. It's the red moon. No, it's something else. By the third night, a second death struck. This time, it was Madhu, a woman who once helped drag Sefu's body toward the forest. She was found in her hut, hands stiff, eyes wide, a spiral of ash drawn neatly on her doorpost. That was when the village changed. The spiral, it became a symbol of fear. It was drawn in silence. Always appearing overnight. Never smeared, never rushed. The shape was precise, a perfect spiral, as if marked by someone who took their time. It began to show up more often. Not just on the homes of the dead, but on the homes of those who had once stood around the circle, who had turned their eyes away, who had known about the ritual and said nothing. No one knew who was marking the doors. Some said it was a spirit. Others swore they saw a figure walking through the village in the dead of night, robed and veiled. A beggar. A woman. Blind. They called her Mfuya. The curse. Sefu remained silent. Each day, she changed her position, sometimes near the shrine, sometimes by the market, sometimes by the path to the well. But always watching. She listened to their voices. She watched their spirits writhe in fear. The fog, the same black mist she had seen in the forest, had grown hungrier. It moved faster now, circling homes, sinking through cracks, curling into sleeping mouths. And she could see its path. It moved toward guilt. Toward sin. She knew who it would take next even before the villagers did. On the fifth night, a child screamed in the dark. His mother had woken to find a spiral burned into the threshold of their hut, no powder, no ash, just the mark etched into the wood like it had grown there. The panic was no longer whispered. The village wailed now, begged, poured offerings before the shrine. Chickens were slaughtered. Priests wailed. Still, the deaths came. One by one, the guilty were claimed. Never violently. Never loudly. Just silence, then the mark, then stillness. By the seventh death, the spiral had become a thing no one dared touch. Those who tried to wash it away claimed their hands blistered. Those who stepped over it reported nightmares. And all the while, Sephu remained in their midst. Unseen. Unquestioned. She watched as the leaders called an emergency gathering. Elder Duma stood trembling before the villagers, his once thundering voice shaking as he promised to perform a final rite, a cleansing ceremony at the shrine to lift the curse. But Sephu saw the truth curling around his body like a noose. Lies slithered along his arms, guilt bloomed from his spine like thorns. In the fog, the fog clung to him like a lover. She knew then that the ritual they had tried to bury, the one they blinded her to forget, had never left. It was alive. It had tasted blood. And now, it had found her. It didn't need her eyes anymore. It moved through her. With her. She had become its compass. And she could feel where it would strike next. The very ritual that was supposed to keep the village safe, the sacred secret they guarded with cruelty, had turned on them. And the girl they thought they had thrown away was the only one who could see the shape of its revenge. The wind shifted. Jabalo felt it first in the animals, the goats bleated without reason, dogs howled at midday, and birds avoided the shrine entirely. The children stopped playing after sunset. Even the bravest among them no longer chased shadows across the square. They clung to their mothers' skirts, whispering of nightmares, of a veiled woman walking without sound, her footsteps leaving black dust in her wake. The villagers met in secret now. Behind locked doors, with thick blankets pressed against the cracks to keep sound from escaping. They lit no lanterns. They spoke in tight, frightened tones. Elder Duma, once a voice of unwavering tradition, had become the loudest whisper in the room. His hands trembled even as he clenched them into fists. "This is Mkali's doing," he hissed to the others. "The witch cursed this village before she vanished. She has poisoned the girl and sent her back to us. This," he motioned to the spiral marks, "is not judgment. It is vengeance." The others nodded too quickly, too eagerly. None dared say her name, not Sephu, not Mkali. Only the blind one or the curse. And yet, every man there knew she had returned. Not as a corpse or a ghost, but as something worse, a memory that refused to stay buried. Within 3 days of Duma's meeting, the shrine came alive again. The masked ones returned, silent, swift, wrapped in crimson robes and carved faces, just as Sephu had seen them long ago. At night, their chants echoed through the trees, low and rhythmic. The villagers dared not look, but Sephu did. Veiled and unseen, she followed. Through her spectral sight, she watched the rituals unfold, not holy rites, but frantic desperation. Chickens bled onto the sacred stone. Goats were tied and left trembling. The priests moved like they were choking on their own fear, their robes stained with panic. The spiral mark had appeared on the edge of the shrine. Not painted. Burned. And then, Sephu saw something new. A girl, maybe 9, maybe 10, bound at the wrists, hidden beneath a shroud near the offering pit. She whimpered softly, a sound only Sephu could hear through the layers of spirit noise. The girl's aura shone with confusion, terror, and innocence, and around her, the fog pulsed hungrily. Not because she was guilty. Because someone wanted her to take the blame. Sephu's chest grew tight. The spiral was no longer punishing alone, it was being manipulated, twisted. The elders were not repenting. They were bargaining. Again. That night, Sephu returned to her spot by the shade tree. And when the villagers passed, she began to speak. Not loudly. Not directly. just low enough for ears that already feared her. To cover blood with more blood, she murmured once, as an elder's wife passed. "Do you hear the child crying beneath the stone?" she said to a merchant's son, who ran screaming. At the river, she leaned toward a group of girls washing clothes and whispered, "The girl they offer next looks just like you." Words spread like smoke on dry wind. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She only whispered. But each whisper landed like a curse. People began looking over their shoulders. Locks were added to doors. Mothers kept their daughters indoors. Men began carrying charms and scratching protective runes into the earth. Still, the deaths continued. Still, the spiral appeared. And still, the blind seer walked. Sephew could feel their guilt growing heavier. Some auras pulsed with shame. Others with quiet resolve. But a few, like Duma, thickened with deceit. His spirit had grown darker, heavier, more entangled with lies than ever before. His words were coated in falsehood. He stood before the village and said they must seal the gate of death with a final offering. He never said what, or who, that offering would be. But Sephew already knew. The ritual they had performed long ago, the one she saw and was punished for, had never been about protection. It had been a deal. A cruel bargain with the forest spirits to ensure Njabalo's prosperity. One child offered. One generation spared. And now, the generation's time had run out. Sephew walked among them like prophecy. Some bowed their heads when she passed, pretending not to see her. Others fled entirely. A few, broken by guilt, began to confess to each other, in hushed tones, behind shuttered windows. Rumors of betrayal surfaced. Accusations were whispered. A woman screamed that her husband had been there that night, that he had helped lift the child onto the stone. He denied it. Then he vanished. The village began to fracture. Families moved apart. Neighbors stopped speaking. Trust dried up like a river in drought. Sephew stood in the center of it all, silent, constant, patient. She no longer needed to ask questions. Her very presence drew out the answers. Guilt couldn't hide from her. She saw the truth blooming like rot beneath the skin. And deep within the shrine, the masked ones prepared the next ritual. They thought she wouldn't stop them. They thought she was only watching. But Sephew wasn't just watching anymore. She was waiting. Drums echoed through Njabalo like a slow heartbeat trying to steady a dying body. Smoke coiled above the village as fires were lit outside every home. Pots of red-stained water boiled beside bundles of herbs, and villagers moved stiffly in silence, eyes dark with fear. The elders had declared an emergency cleansing, the festival of red water, an ancient rite meant to wash death from the soil, to pacify the spirits and seal the gates of the underworld. But no one danced. No one sang. Even the drummers struck their skins as if afraid the beat might wake something watching. At the shrine, the heart of the ritual pulsed like an open wound. The masked ones had returned in full, surrounding the sacred stone in a tight circle, their carved faces gleaming with sweat and desperation. The elder priestess stood among them, draped in her red veil, hands coated in oil and ash. In front of her knelt a small girl, barely breathing, her wrists bound with twisted vine, eyes wide and unfocused. She looked not at the shrine, but to the sky, as if begging it to shatter open and steal her away. Sephew watched from the edge of the circle. Veiled, silent, unnoticed. But not unseen. Her sight moved beyond the surface. She saw the thorns of guilt coiled around the priestess's arms, the heavy mist of lies smothering the masked ones. She saw the fog again, dense, slow, creeping like a beast through the crowd. It had wrapped itself around the shrine now, waiting. Hungry. And then, the drum stopped. The priestess raised her hand. Her voice, once rich and commanding, now shook. "Let the blood cleanse the path," she intoned. "Let the child carry our burden. Let the spirits feed." She reached for the dagger, the same curved blade used in the old rites. But before the blade could fall, a sound cut through the air. A chant. Low at first. Then louder. The sacred chant. The one only the blinded were supposed to forget. The one whispered during punishment. The one never meant to be spoken again. It came from the crowd. From a figure, veiled in brown, stepping forward with quiet purpose. The villagers parted instinctively, as if pushed by invisible hands. No one breathed. No one moved. Sephu walked slowly to the center, her voice steady, ancient, burning with memory. The priestess froze. The masked ones shifted, unsure. Then Sephu stopped before the shrine. And lifted her veil. The crowd gasped. Faces twisted in recognition, in denial. Some dropped to their knees. Others stumbled backward. Children screamed. A pot shattered on the ground. Sephu's face was calm. The skin around her eyes still bore the scars of the ash, but her gaze burned through them, glowing faintly with that strange spectral light. She turned to the priestess, who was now trembling, dagger still poised but her hand useless. "You marked me," Sephu said, voice ringing like a bell. "You called me cursed. You blinded me to hide your guilt. But I see you. I see all of you." She turned to the crowd, voice rising with each word. Aboro, who spat on a child and held the rope. Madhu, who brought the offering herbs and swore she saw nothing. Elder Nkasha, who said the gods demanded a child's blood, though it was never written in any stone. With each name, someone in the crowd screamed. Some tried to run. Others fell where they stood, clutching their ears. The priestess dropped the dagger and backed away. Sephu turned to the bound child and knelt. Her fingers touched the vine, and it fell away like dry grass. Then the rain came. Soft at first, a drizzle. Then harder. But it wasn't clear. It was red. Dark and thick, like watered blood, it splashed onto the shrine, into the offerings, down the priestess's robe. The spiral symbol sizzled on the sacred stone. Villagers screamed. Some dropped their tools and ran. Others fell to the ground, wailing. The masked ones looked to each other, unsure whether to run or bow. But Sephu was not finished. Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. It reached deeper than the ears, into the bones. "You gave the spirits a child once," she said. "Now they come for the rest." The wind howled through the trees. The shrine groaned, not from stone, but from something deeper. Then the earth cracked. Not wide. Not loud. Just enough. The fog that had hovered suddenly coiled upward, and from it rose the shapes, not bodies, not spirits, something in between. Children with hollow eyes. Faces blurred by time. Hands reaching forward, not for vengeance, but for truth. Sephu stood still. The crowd fled in chaos. The priestess collapsed, eyes wide, as one of the shadow children touched her shoulder. She gasped, not in pain, but as though remembering something she had buried long ago. Sephu turned once more to the villagers. "You feared me. You tried to erase me. But it is not I who haunt you. It is your own memory. Your own silence." The rain did not stop. It poured over the shrine, washing away ash, washing away lies. And in its place, the truth bloomed like fire. The festival of red water had begun to cleanse. But not in the way they hoped. And not for them. The rain did not stop. It poured long after the ritual was broken, soaking the shrine until the red earth turned to blood-colored sludge. The spiral marks on doorposts began to bleed, running like ink into the soil. The villagers huddled in their homes, whispering prayers that rose no higher than the thatched roofs. But the sky did not listen. Then the ground began to tremble. It started as a low hum beneath the feet, like the earth remembering something it had buried. Pots clattered. Roofs creaked. Birds fled in a single, frantic wave. And in the center of Njabalo, where the shrine stood, the shaking deepened. Sephu stood at the heart of it all, her veil gone, her face bare, eyes gleaming with light that was not human. The shrine cracked. A long, winding fracture split the sacred stone in two. It groaned like an old wound reopening, and from the break came not water, not ash, but bone. Dozens of small bones, dry and gray, tumbled forward like truth refusing to be hidden. Tiny ribs. Curved skulls. The remains of children. Gasps broke from the mouths of those still gathered. Wails followed. Some dropped to their knees. Others fled in terror, tripping over the wet earth. Elder Duma screamed, "This is your doing," but his words fell dead in the air. From beneath the bones, thick black smoke began to rise. Not like fire. This smoke had shape. Memory. Pain. It crawled upwards, slow and deliberate, twisting in the air like a serpent. And then it formed, into something too big, too old, too sorrowful to name. The spirit of the betrayed child. It had no face, only a glowing mouth that stretched wide in silent mourning. Its limbs were fog and bone, its chest pulsed with a hollow beat. Every movement shook the shrine. Every breath carried a scream only the guilty could hear. The villagers wept. But Sephu did not move. She walked calmly to the edge of the pit, her bare feet soaked in rain and memory. Her eyes, those scarred vessels of ash and fire, turned upward toward the beast. Then she knelt. Head bowed. Hands open. Voice clear. "I offer what they tried to take." She reached up and touched her own face, dragging her fingers over the scars. "My sight. My silence. My name. Take what remains, spirit of sorrow. Take it, and give this land its truth." The beast leaned down, and for a moment, all sound vanished. Its shadowy fingers brushed her eyelids. A wind surged outward, tossing back every mask, every veil, every lie. The air shimmered. And then, her eyes opened. Not the spectral sight she had known. Real sight. True sight. Color returned. Light poured in. The world snapped into clarity, more vivid than before. She could see each drop of rain. Each crack in the stone. Each guilty face trying to vanish into the crowd. The spirit had accepted her gift. But returned it in full. And now, justice began. The first to fall was Elder Nkasha. The smoke reached for her like a hand of old memory, and she screamed as it wrapped around her legs, dragging her backward across the red soil. Her mouth opened wide, confessing, cursing, before she was swallowed whole. Next came Madu's son. Then the merchant who had sold the ceremonial rope. Then the midwife who had held the child still. One by one, the guilty were claimed. Their names unspoken, but known. Their bodies disappeared into the smoke with no resistance, only the sounds of their screams echoing into the sky. The crowd scattered, but no one could run far. Because the fog moved faster than fear. Elder Duma, on his knees, sobbed into the earth. "Mercy," he cried. "Forgive me. I only did what the old laws commanded." Sephu turned to him slowly, her eyes shining like polished obsidian. "You stole my light," she said. "Now live in darkness." She raised her palm, and the spirit turned toward Duma. He clawed at the ground. Begged. Promised. The smoke touched him, and he went silent. Then the light in Jabalo went out. All torches, all fires, all lanterns, extinguished. The rain stopped. But the darkness remained. Not just around them, within them. One by one, the villagers cried out. "I can't see. Mama, I'm blind. My eyes. My eyes." Panic spread, but it was no use. The entire village, every man, every woman, had been struck blind. Not with pain. With truth. For 3 days, they would live as Sephu had. In silence. In shadows. In fear. Only the children could see. Their eyes shimmered faintly, touched by something sacred. And they turned, not to the elders, not to the shrine, but to Sephu. She stood tall, hair soaked, clothes torn, but whole. The children gathered at her feet like stars around a night fire. No one told them to. They just knew. One small girl took her hand. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Sephu looked beyond the ruined shrine, past the cracked circle, toward the forest where truth still whispered through the trees. "Forward," she said. And the children followed. The village of Njabalo did not die, but it was never the same again. 3 days after the darkness fell, the light returned, but not to everyone. Many regained their sight, though not fully. The world remained dim, hazy, as if the earth itself had scolded them and left a mark that would never quite fade. Some elders refused to speak ever again. Others left the village entirely, walking into the forest and never returning. The shrine was sealed with stone and thick roots, buried under silence. No new rituals were performed. No sacrifices. No chants. The spiral stopped appearing. But the fear remained. And at the edge of the forest, where the trees tangled like memories and the birds grew quiet at dusk, she built her home. A low hut of moss and carved wood, smoke always curling from its roof. Sephu, now called Nyevu, the one who sees, lived alone, yet was never truly alone. The villagers never approached directly. They left offerings on flat stones, fruits, carved figures, bowls of water, strands of hair. Not to worship her, but to stay on her good side. Adults rarely dared to meet her eyes, afraid they might see their secrets reflected back. Some whispered that she spoke to the dead. Others claimed she walked between worlds. Most simply said, "Don't cross Nyevu." But the children came. They weren't afraid. They arrived quietly in the early mornings and sat in a circle before her hut. They asked questions no adult dared speak aloud. Why did the spirits come? Why could you see when you were blind? Will the ash return? Sephu never lied. She told them of pain, and justice, and the dangers of silence. She taught them how to sit still long enough to feel the wind shifting before it does. She showed them how to listen for the lies in a person's breath, how to trust the twitch in their belly more than the words in their ears. Eyes are not the only way to see, she would say. And they believed her. Some days, she would walk the forest paths alone, barefoot, fingers trailing against bark like it spoke her name. She still saw the fog sometimes, faint, far off, near the mountains or circling forgotten huts in distant lands. The curse had not died. It had simply moved on, looking for silence in other places. At night, her fire never dimmed. Sometimes, from the village, people said they saw her silhouette, drifting through the trees, long hair swaying, eyes glowing faintly like coals beneath ash. Some swore she visited houses where the old spiral had once been carved, just to ensure no one had forgotten. And always, she walked alone. Except she didn't. And when night falls, the villagers now say in hushed voices, some say they still see her, walking past doors marked in ash, with the dead following behind.